joined by Shawn Kelly. He is press secretary for the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. Shawn, how have liquor sales been affected since the governor announced the restrictions on state stores and other businesses in mid-March?
Well, all of our stores have closed as of March 17th, close of business then, including our online store. That was originally closed the evening of March 16th. Since then, we've been able to restart sales via e-commerce. Our website is finewineandgoodspirits.com. We've been processing about 1,800 orders a day for the past several days. Since the resumption of online sales on Wednesday, April 1st, right up through 11:59 p.m. Saturday, April 11th, we've accepted more than 15,000 orders and had more than $1.4 million in sales. For context, in all of fiscal year 2018-19, we filled about 39,000 orders, totaling about $5 million in sales. So since we restored online sales, we've accepted nearly 40% of our yearly online order total in 11 days.
Online sales are randomized. Can you explain what that means?
Well, in the interest of maintaining the integrity of the protections we put around our website, we're not going to comment on specific technical details, but you are correct. The website access is randomized. People can try to log on at various times throughout the day, and then they will be let in totally by random by the computer.
Once a sale online does occur, is there any way to protect and ensure that the recipient is actually 21 years of age?
When the product is delivered to the recipient, UPS will ask that someone over the age of 21 go to the door. Traditionally, they've asked for someone to sign after showing ID, but in these days, nobody wants to be signing anything. So they have to show ID that proves that they are over 21 before left at the door.
Is there any expectation of further expanding online sales at this time?
We are working every single day to try to increase order capacity. It is our intention to bring more fulfillment centers online. Again, for context, traditionally we have one internet fulfillment center. It was in Montgomery County, which early on was the hardest hit county in Pennsylvania with the most number of cases. But we have brought on other fulfillment centers to try to bolster the number of orders we can take a day. We have plans to add more fulfillment centers so we could increase our order capacity. We understand that these are products that people of Pennsylvania really want, and we're doing the best we can in very difficult circumstances. The system was not designed to scale up, so our team has been working very hard to do that on the fly. The fact that we've done roughly 40% of our yearly online order total in 11 days speaks to the commitment of the PLCB to get this process better than it is. And we ask that people just remain patient.
While online sales are being fulfilled, what other safety measures have been put into place to make sure that employees remain safe?
We've implemented what are considered public health best practices, facility sanitation, social distancing, limiting the number of employees working in any facility at any given time. We've really tried to take steps to protect our employees because they are valuable just as the online sales are valuable.
Being that Pennsylvanians have limited options to acquire liquor at this time, have you found that there's been a lot of border bleed of Pennsylvanians crossing the border to try to get liquor from other states?
I've read stories and seen stories in the media about that, so anecdotally we are aware of it, but the enforcement of that would fall to the Pennsylvania State Police Bureau of Liquor Control Enforcement, not the PLCB.
What has happened with state store employees during this time of closure?
Friday, April 10th marked the end of the governor's paid office closure. At that time, approximately 4,500 PLCB employees were laid off. So it's a difficult situation for the entire PLCB team.
Have you received any guidance from the administration as to when the liquor stores might reopen?
We have conversations with the Wolf administration, with the Department of Health, with public health officials. every single day to try to figure out when we can reopen brick and mortar stores. We're taking steps to make sure that when stores are open, we will have social distancing best practices in place. We have 600 stores system-wide. It's kind of a challenge to get everybody on the same page to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, but it's something that we are working on. We really want to get the stores open for people. As soon as we hear from the authorities that we're good to go in a safe manner, then we will do that.
We've been speaking with Shawn Kelly, Press Secretary for the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
During the uncertain times brought on by the coronavirus outbreak, PCN remains committed to the needs of Pennsylvania and its people. PCN provides free daily coronavirus updates from Governor Wolf and the Department of Health Secretary Dr. Levine, live, on air, and streaming on the app and online. These updates will be available to watch in their entirety on demand for free by downloading the PCN app or at pcntv.com. PCN, committed to keeping Pennsylvania informed.
We're joined by Robin Kolodny. She's a professor of political science at Temple University. How do you expect the coronavirus will impact Pennsylvania's political landscape?
Well, it's really early to say. What we know right now is that throughout the country, people's governors who have acted quickly and decisively, like Pennsylvania's have shown a lot more confidence in state government than they have in the federal government. And so I expect in Pennsylvania, you're going to see that trend continue. However, if the legislature and the governor continue to remain in some stalemate about what's going to happen next with budgets and with cost cutting, then that could have some implications, and they might be along partisan lines. Pennsylvania has been always a razor-thin state in terms of its performance with the two parties, but starting in 2018, the state has leaned more Democratic, and Governor Wolf, he may not be on the talk shows or the clips may not be there as much as for Governor Cuomo in New York, but pretty much their behavior has been similar.
On what kind of factors do you think Pennsylvanians judge their leaders and the leaders' ability to get their constituents through this pandemic?
Well, I don't think it's any different than any other constituency. I don't think Pennsylvanians are unique from Americans, but like any of us, what we want is a clear and thoughtful set of directions. We want to know that somebody is thinking through the complex webs of what holds our society and our economy together. And things like, you may not love the decision that no Pennsylvania school children will be going back to school, but on the other hand, many people appreciate having that information in going into the second week of April rather than drawing this out another month. So it's decisive. It could be controversial, but at least we can all plan for that. So now you're going to have people in state government and in schools all across the state talking together about what would be the best way to handle the remainder of this school year, and probably most importantly, the adjustments you'll have to make for the following school year. So that's, to me, a positive thing that, again, people might not agree with the decision, but I think that in the long run, they'll be appreciative that they had the time to respond.
Do you think that public sentiment for how one's leaders have handled the pandemic will have a coattails effect on how people vote, not only in the presidential race, but perhaps congressional races and the lower level tier races as well?
Well, I would expect that it would, yes. Of course, now the big unknown is exactly what is going to happen with elections, both in June for the primary and, more importantly, for the general election. So it is clear that all across the country, states are scrambling at the moment to see if they can do an entirely vote by mail scenario, which of course would be the safest for all involved. And as somebody who is from my local polling place, I know that the county that I'm in would really like to minimize the number of people that not only work the polls, but show up to the polls if they can do that. But this is going to be very tough for a state like ours. This is where Pennsylvania is different. So as you probably know, there's other states in the West, mostly, who have been doing vote by mail for a very long time. In Washington State and in Oregon, for instance, they haven't had in-person polling places for years. So they're set up for exactly this kind of situation. This is not a problem for them. We, however, and with not unusual, most East Coast states are like this, are highly suspicious of the mail fraud that we've seen happen in our state previously, or that people are concerned might happen. And so we are much more oriented toward an in-person polling situation. So I would predict that if the states and the counties can do a good job of preparing now for going all online in November, I think it will be seamless and easy. And I'm talking this way, I know you've asked me about what the results are likely to be, because that has to do with turnout. So the June 2nd primary now, first, it's been delayed. And secondly, many people predicted that into April, we would still not know who the Democratic presidential frontrunner is. Well, now we know. And so now we've got two reasons for people not to make an extra effort to come out. One is that the thing has been delayed. And the second is that if they were really invested in the Democratic presidential primary outcome, there's no reason to do that anymore. So I think that people will probably be concerned that turnout will be down significantly because people won't want to come out in person, and also they won't have thought in enough time to get the absentee ballot. But there's much more time to get people prepared. And I think that if most Pennsylvanians realize that it's going to be very easy, a phone call or an online form to get that, then I think you'll see pretty significant turnout in the general election. And in 2018, we saw a lot more mobilization and turnout on the Democratic side than we did on the Republican side. And given what polls are showing right now, I would anticipate that will be the edge right now.
New voter law. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Which side does the better job? I've already, in my home, we've already gotten one mailing from the Republican National Committee with 2 applications for absentee ballots.
New election law now allows voters to utilize no excuse absentee ballots.
Yes.
Keeping that in mind, does that change who or how many people participate and turn out in our elections?
Yes, absolutely, as long as they know about it. And so that is going to be the challenge, is how to get the message out to most Pennsylvanians that this has become much easier and can happen much later than it used to be able to. And that's really the critical thing, because it's not a high salient issue in terms of most people are paying attention saying, oh, great, these reforms passed, it's so much easier. No, it's something that people have to be educated about. And so that's the trick. I think that once you do it and you realize that it's not a big issue to do, then I do think that a lot of people, like college students, for example, who are probably, it's interesting in talking to my students at Temple University, I am concerned for them that they've had so much mobility in the last few months. And this is really a significant issue. They may have been ready to vote at the end of April in their dorms, but now they're not living in their dorms. And have they changed their registration? In fact, that's what we find in terms of voter turnout, that the people who move the most, and that's the young and the poor, are the ones who have to be constantly checking in on how their voter registration is set. And that's going to be, then will influence how much they'll access an absentee ballot.
Has the pandemic changed what issues are of top importance to voters? And perhaps if so, do you see evidence of candidates gravitating toward different issues?
Oh, of course. I think that, I hope that one of the best things that will come out of this is a change in people's attitudes about the role of government in general. I think one reason that we've had more contentious politics is that there's one party that's been beating the drum for a couple of decades now. The government is the poise, been a bit unfair because there's some analogies to how government runs like a business. Well, if there was any time when we could see in a pandemic that if that was the case, the business would have gone out of business and there would be no one there. And it's exactly the wrong way to think about it. The reason that we have governments is to fill in when we can't anticipate an event like this. So the analogy will be, especially with the economic implications of the pandemic, to the Great Depression and the New Deal, that potentially we need government to do that kind of thing. So that, I think, is the most immediate challenge, is that that if I now think that government may be better, not worse, than I did before. And the other thing that I'm heartened by, which is why I started about talking about the states, is that I think there will be more awareness of what state and local governments do compared to the federal government. And I think that's one reason why people think the government doesn't do very much, because they think government and they think C-SPAN and Washington, D.C. And they're not thinking about that our local first responders are governmental employees, and that, you know, what the state is doing and the county executives and public health apparatuses, that all of these are where our state and local, our sales tax and our other property taxes go. So I think that this is really a good moment, in a strange way, for us to be reminded again that the government that's closest to us is probably the most important to us, yet we know the least about it.
Do you think the pandemic will have a long-term impact on how campaigns conduct themselves moving forward?
Well, it's going to have to, because the coin of the realm has always been the big rally and getting supporters to come and getting a big crowd so it looks good on television. Well, if we're telling everybody don't do that, then you're obviously going to have to go to other ways to get your message across. Obviously, every candidate has already had an online strategy. It's just a matter of how effective they will be in engaging people that are in ways beyond advertising, because that's, you know, I have teenagers. It's really easy to avoid ads if you know what you're doing. And so you want to find other ways to engage them.
Robin Kolodny is a professor of political science at Temple University. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Watch PCN's coverage of Pennsylvania politics and policy, history and culture, sports, and more with the PCN app. Stream live events and video on demand in HD from your favorite device. Go to PCNTV.com to start streaming today.
I'm joined today by State Senator Sharif Street. Senator, as someone representing Philadelphia, one of the hardest hit regions of the state, what do you see as your role in responding to the needs of your constituents during this pandemic?
Well, I think we have a number of roles. First and foremost, as a legislator, we need to make sure that the Commonwealth is providing the support and resources and making the changes that are needed to be made. We have hospitals that were already financially strapped. We have we're fortunate, we have some of the best healthcare systems in the world, but those healthcare systems were pretty taxed. And so I'm glad that we made available the $50 million of additional resources for health systems. Making changes like moving election day so we don't have the kinds of social distancing nightmares we saw in Wisconsin happen in Pennsylvania is something as members of the General Assembly we did that was responsible. Making the changes so that to make it easier for people to get unemployment compensation benefits for all the people out of work was another substantive things. And then some of the things we did are along around making it easier for school districts to make adaptations, as we've had to cancel in-person school meetings. I think that's another thing. The other role we have is in getting information out to the public. We are a little closer to the public than the governor is. And I think it's important that as he communicates with us, we adequately communicate that information to members of the public. And then finally, our counties are pretty big and represented by multiple legislators. We can serve and have correspondingly sometimes large bureaucracies. We can sort of facilitate communications between the state administration and the various departments and the corresponding county and municipal departments that are needed to address people's needs.
Last week when the Senate was in session, they considered a package, I believe it was Senate Bill 841. Can you explain for our viewers what this would accomplish?
Well, we some of the things we looked at were providing some additional relief to small businesses. Those were some of the things we're looking at. We also looked at providing additional support for healthcare workers. The details of how some of this gets how these programs get administered are largely being worked out by the departments themselves. And so while those seem like fairly broad strokes, a lot of what we're doing is providing the legislative authority needed. An additional thing we did, of course, was we waived the 180-day rule for the school districts so that young people who, no fault of their own, haven't had in-person classes will be able to graduate from school.
Can you tell us about some other healthcare-related legislation you might want to see move in the upcoming weeks? Things like perhaps telemedicine or pharmaceutical price transparency, those sort of things.
Yeah, well, we did it. The Senate passed last session a telemedicine bill. Unfortunately, there were changes to that didn't really relate to telemedicine that were added in the House. I think we need to move telemedicine bill. We can see now more than ever that people, whether they live in urban settings or rural settings, need telemedicine. Telemedicine is particularly important to people in rural communities who may not have access all the time. But in urban settings, it can be helpful in terms of reducing backlog of people who are unnecessarily going into emergency room or urgent care centers because they need to get questions answered. And moreover, bring down the cost of healthcare. The other thing is presumptive eligibility for home care. We're looking at so many people who may have had to move into nursing homes that would have preferred to age in place at home. Legislation that I've co-sponsored that would allow people to remain at home and receive the kind of support they need by being presumptively eligible for home care services as they can be deemed presumptively eligible for nursing home services can be really helpful. Not only is it cheaper and save taxpayers money, not only is it preferred in many cases by folks, but now we're seeing that reducing the number of people who live in congregate spaces can be incredibly important during an epidemic like this one. COVID has spread much more quickly in nursing homes, and if more people were living at home, the social distancing would be a lot more possible for those folks.
Once restrictions are lifted, what can be done to stimulate the economy?
Well, there are a few things. We've got to make sure the dollar is not only getting in the hands of large businesses, but small businesses. There probably will be a phasing in of what kinds of businesses can be reopened given the challenges. Certainly, some of the construction industry that happens outdoors and where you can provide protective equipment and people can work in ways where they don't have to have as much up close contact could probably be open before certain other kinds of businesses. But then when we're completely back to normal, we have to remind people that it's okay to go to a restaurant, and we have to make sure that we don't lose the vitality of food, of restaurants and hospitality industry that Pennsylvania is known for, from Philadelphia, which is one of the world's premier tourist destinations, to Valley Forge out in Montgomery County, to the Pocono Mountains, State College, and Pittsburgh and Erie all have resort areas. So Pennsylvania has attracted a significant amount of hospitality industry. That's our hardest hit industry, and we have to make a real concerted effort to make sure that the businesses that made those tourist areas so attractive don't go out of business. And then we have to really probably do some real work promoting and encouraging people to come back and visit those areas. So I mean, those are some of the things. And then moreover, there are going to be a number of businesses who have deferred expenses but need grants and not just loans to make that up, because if you get into a cycle where people are just constantly burdened with too much debt, it's hard for businesses to grow. So I think those are some of the things we're going to have to address as we move towards getting back to normal.
The Independent Fiscal Office projected potentially up to a $4 billion shortfall this year. As a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, how do you envision the budget being different, perhaps priorities being different than they were back in February when the governor originally proposed the budget?
Well, I mean, obviously, things have changed dramatically, and I think that the governor will make those adjustments. He's already made some cost savings adjustments, and I don't know that the Independent Fiscal Office had taken into account. I think that was deficits, assuming that we didn't make any adjustments, which the governor has in terms of expenditure funds. Moreover, I'm optimistic that in next year's fiscal budget, the third and fourth quarters are likely to be stronger than the early quarters, but I think the IFO can't responsibly count on that. So I can share as an elected official a little bit more optimism than the IFO would have to have us work with. But I think the other thing is we have to be very careful not to realize that we may not be able to completely cut our way out of this. We're going to have to make strategic investments in various industries. There are services that need to be had, and moreover, we're going to have to make some investments in the future. If we don't make those investments, then we're probably going to have individual small businesses saddled with levels of debt that are unsustainable for them, and it probably makes more sense for the Commonwealth to take on some of that because while some industries like the hospitality industry were most hard hit, it's not because of irresponsible conduct. They shut down their businesses in order to benefit all of us. And as a consequence, there needs to be some shared responsibility for bearing the weight of that. And whether that is through the Commonwealth using some of its borrowing capacity to make up for those shortfalls, or if it is in the way of enhanced revenue. The second thing, there is going to be, I anticipate that there will be significant additional federal revenue to make up for some of the losses associated with COVID. And I don't think we really will be able to get a good sense of what those numbers are until Congress and the federal administration have worked out what a final federal package looks like, and then we'll have a sense of what adjustments need to be made. But most importantly, we have to make sure that Pennsylvania small business owners, Pennsylvania workers understand they're not alone and that we're here for them.
One last question before I let you go. What do you think about the governor's move to allow the early release of nonviolent prisoners to help mitigate the spread of COVID-19?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we have people in many county jails who are just waiting for trials that are not going to take place anytime soon because county courts have little or no court services going on. We have people who are already scheduled for release, but who haven't been processed because of the shutdown. And what we know is that people who are scheduled for who are low-risk individuals who are already scheduled for release, to have them stay in incarcerated settings, become infected, and then we release them later on, would not only contribute to infections of people in prison, but ultimately contribute to reinfections of the general population later on when they're released. So to the extent that we can safely release low-risk individuals and reintegrate those folks into society a little sooner and stop the spread of COVID, I think it makes a lot of sense. We both, as a moral imperative, a health imperative, and an economic imperative, can't afford to have a relapse of what we're seeing with COVID. And prisons can be great incubators. And not only that, when we release people, if there were 2 people in a cell and you release one, then that one individual in that cell can practice social distancing in a way that would have been impossible if there were multiple individuals in a cell. So reducing the density of our prison population allows social distancing, saves money, and ultimately protects the public, which is all of our first priority.
Senator Sharif Street, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you as well.
Take a nostalgic look back at some of the best games PCN has televised over the past 20 years with PCN Sports Classics. Watch the entire game without interruption and get updates on key players and coaches who have made Pennsylvania sports history. Watch new episodes monthly and stream the full series on demand with the PCN Select streaming service. Visit PCNTV.com to subscribe. PCN, proud to bring Pennsylvania sports to you.
Kevin Kulp, the president of the Harrisburg Senators. Kevin, you're now about to begin, or hoping to begin, your 13th season here on City Island. I know originally you are from the southern portion of the United States, and you've now had over a decade on the northern end of the Mason-Dixon line. I'm assuming that you have fully acclimated yourself to life above the Mason-Dixon line.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love central Pennsylvania. You know, my kids were young when we moved here. Second grade and a 2-year-old, you know, back then. And they've, this is home for them. It's home for us. It's a great part of the country.
Obviously that everything has had to adjust as well. It's been a major adjustment for people in Pennsylvania as well as the rest of the country. What are you and your staff doing right now? Obviously your season was to begin, your home season was scheduled to begin on April 16th. All of that obviously is on hold, as is all of professional baseball and all of professional sports. So what are you guys doing on a regular basis in terms of your staff and your meetings and talking about right now?
I tell you, this is usually a very hectic time of the year. I mean, opening day for minor league baseball is tomorrow or on the 9th. And I am, you know, so for us, it's a lot of trying to get our ducks in a row. There's so many unknowns that we don't know yet, but trying to anticipate the things that we can do either now, and we're doing some of those things now, but especially trying to line things up so that when we do get some clear, definitive information on when our season's going to start, we'll be better equipped to just jump in, because it's going to be, when it's go time, it's going to be really go time to try to line everything up and to recalibrate everything with all of our partners and our promotional schedule to get things going and give ourselves our best chance for a good balance of the season.
The Harrisburg Senators are the AA affiliate in the Eastern League for the Washington Nationals, the World Series champion Washington Nationals. As a lifelong Phillies fan, as you can see by the 1980 World Series mug behind me, it's taken me that much of a time to admit that they are the World Series champion Washington Nationals. But obviously it was a huge thing, I'm sure, for you and the organization, because you certainly feel like you're a part of that World Series championship.
Oh, we are. We're part of their family, and they've made us feel very, very much a part of their family. And it was awesome. I mean, the 2019 season finished with a celebration to win the World Championship for our Nationals, and that couldn't have been any more pride that we have in playing our part in developing those young guys to be a part of that team. When you look at just the field on that last game, 6 or 7 of those guys were big parts of the Senators organization, and it's there's a lot of pride we get from that for sure.
And obviously that was part of your promotional efforts, I'm sure, going into this season, that you're going to be a lot of ties to your promotional efforts and the Senators' ties to the Nationals.
Absolutely. I mean, it was we were going to milk it for all it was worth. I mean, you don't often get
Sure.
you know, to celebrate a World Series championship and to celebrate those players that were members of our team, and yeah, it's still playing. You know, we still plan on, you know, whenever that is, we are going to make that a big part of our promotional effort, because, you know, you're never going to take that World Series away from the Nationals, and those guys are always going to be part of our family, and we will definitely celebrate that when the time is right.
So speaking of promotional efforts, the story broke out last week. You guys released this last week, something that the Senators are planning to do, kind of a special thing that you're going to do for the first responders, the people who are amidst of all of this pandemic evolution, of whatever you want to call what's going on with the coronavirus around the central Pennsylvania, and you have an idea in your heads from a promotional standpoint to kind of help out.
Well, you know, and it was a collaborative effort with a lot of our partners, and bringing them on board for this. You know, we struggle to try to figure out, you know, what role can we play right now? How can we be instrumental in this time frame from a, you know, however that might be, putting a smile on people's faces, helping as best we can. And, you know, so we came up with the idea of donating a voucher, along with, you know, our partners coming on board with us to donate a voucher. If anyone buys a voucher to a future Senators game, undated, that we'll donate one back to a healthcare worker for them to use whenever their schedules permit. And it's a small thing, but it's something we wanted to do to show our thanks for those who are putting themselves in harm's way every day.
Really is a great idea. An idea that's come about over the course of the last couple of days, the last 24 to 48 hours. People have proposed the idea about Major League Baseball getting underway maybe a little bit sooner than people thought, with the idea that essentially all Major League Baseball teams would go to Arizona, play in Arizona, kind of lock themselves down in Arizona to get the baseball season back and underway. Talking about the Major League Baseball season, obviously. Do you give that idea, that thought process, any validity?
Yeah, it's just I know there's a lot of hurdles they have to cross, and I know first and foremost, Major League Baseball wants to make sure they're being safe and that they're doing all the right things and that they're getting they're going to have to dot all their I's, and it takes a lot of time for them to explore that idea. It's a great idea. I hope it comes to fruition, because I'm certainly would love to see baseball on TV again sometime soon to get my mind off of everything else. I'm sure a lot of other people feel that way, but we all recognize that it's got to be done, and it might not be able to be done. There's a lot of hurdles to cross, and I hope I don't know much more than what you're reading or any of your listeners are reading in the media, but I certainly hope it comes to fruition. But I know that it's going to be a daunting task to get all those things organized.
And then there's the flip side of it, and that's your business, which is minor league baseball. And so much emphasis has been placed in the game of baseball in the last few years on player development. There's always a part of it, but maybe a little bit more expedited because of the salaries of baseball players and because baseball players are getting to a point where they can touch base in the major leagues quickly. Two players, for example, that have come through Harrisburg, one of whom is Bryce Harper, obviously now playing for the Phillies, but Juan Soto, who's playing for the Nationals. Stars in Major League Baseball by the time they're 20 years of age. So the thought is that if this doesn't happen from a minor league baseball standpoint, you could lose an entire year off a player's development, which would be absolutely detrimental to a lot of teams and the organizations.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that development process, it is different for every player, but the common denominator in that is these guys need to play. They need to play. They need to learn they need to learn, and they need to fail, and they need to learn from that. And it's such a process, and it takes a different amount of time for each player. But if you just stop that process altogether for a year, you have, and none of us have been through that before. The industry's never been through that before. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I got to think that Major League Baseball is going to do whatever they can to get those players some work so that they develop in the time frame that's best for that player and for that organization.
I think I probably know the answer to the question, but the question that just persists in my head, is there a point in your mind as the president of Harrisburg Senators that if we can't get started by X, there's really not a point for us to continue going forward in 2020?
We have got to have people, for us, different than Major League Baseball, where they have substantial revenues coming in from TV rights and playing in front of empty ballparks is in their best interest that they can figure it out. That's the whole premise behind getting started as soon as they can in Arizona. Get those games on TV, and there's value in that for the Major League club. For us, though, we got to have people in the ballpark for anything to make sense for us. So we know that is a daunting task, and we're going to follow, and the industry is going to follow the guidelines set forth that is right for everybody. But if we don't, for us, we're hopeful for sometime in June to be able to get the all clear for them to send those guys up north, because if we're able to get a season started in June or early July even, it won't be a full season, but we'll be able to be creative with it. And we will maybe be able to play longer than what the traditional minor league season is. These are all things, though, that I'm not an expert in, and I'm just speculating on a lot of the things that could take place in terms of giving those guys, those players, and the minor league clubs enough of a chance to have enough of a season to get over this hump and then start planning for 2021. But it would be really, really, really good if the minor league clubs could get their season started sometime in mid to late June, even early July. Beyond that, I guess once you get much beyond that, it's going to be difficult because there's not going to be much of a season left, and they might try to get a season started in August and give us a couple of months, depending on what the situation is. So that's not out of the realm of possibility either. I'll take whatever they give us. Certainly, the more we get, the better. But anything's better than nothing. But we understand that if it's nothing, that's a possibility too. We got to, who knows what's going to happen with this pandemic, and we got to be safe first and foremost. And whatever comes at us. I know the Senators and all the other minor league clubs are committed to doing whatever it takes to get over this hump. But we want to play baseball this year for sure.
Thanks, Kevin. Hopefully we'll be playing baseball at City Island someday, one of these days, very soon.
Well, there will be baseball sometime, and when it is, it's going to be a big party. So it's going to be a party.
Kevin Kulp, president of the Harrisburg Senators.